A lot of the stuff I read out there in the media, on the web, is this kind of agitation or anger that the office isn't responding to people. I read an article yesterday that spoke about a rare public appearance by Joshua Dubois at the Pew Forum. So I think there's this sentiment out there that transparency is not really up to snuff, that they're not hearing back from the office as much as they'd like to. Folks have questions. Right, and apparently the answers aren't immediately forthcoming. Is there any warrant to that?
Some of that might be a manpower problem. Right. Dubois is still hiring for his office. He's only going to have 3 to 6 people in his office. So I suspect that's where some of the problem's coming from.
So why doesn't he have enough manpower? And I've heard little Washington birds whispering in my ear that there are some quadrants of the Obama administration that aren't totally sold on this office of faith-based and neighborhood partnerships. They represent the old secular guard, and they see it as kind of frivolous and perhaps contradictory to the spirit of the Democratic Party. Is there any warrant for that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There is a secular component to the Democratic Party that is still highly suspicious of this and see it as a Bush leftover that they much prefer would just fly out and go away.
Do you think that within the administration as well there might be some folks that are a little skeptical about this office?
Well, clearly if there's skeptics in the Democratic Party as a whole, there have got to be skeptics among the Obama administration. It's also a potential power source that some would prefer not to have to deal with.
All right, now we would be remiss if we didn't get to the one issue that absolutely boondoggled the Bush administration, this question about hiring and who these faith-based organizations can hire. It's kind of complex. You are uniquely qualified to explain it to us. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, I'll try. Okay. But with the Bush administration, organizations were permitted to hire only within their faith. In other words, they could violate the First Amendment and discriminate and hire. It was called co-religiosity. I love that term. Obama said when he announced the program that he was not going to pick up that part of it. He saw that as discrimination. He's backed off from that a bit. And when he signed the executive order creating the office, he talked about bouncing this over to the Justice Department and that decisions will be made on a case-by-case basis.
We keep hearing this case-by-case basis, which sounds like Washington speak for we're going to table that for a while. Right?
Well, I think that might be the case.
We
haven't seen any cases yet.
We haven't seen any cases? Mm-hmm. All right. So
well, there's also tens of thousands of faith-based organizations get grants. How are they possibly going to do that? And Dubois at the Pew Forum meeting last week said the president was going to decide these particular cases, which seems to be just a monstrous issue to have to take on. What they're saying is that they are going to weigh the constitutionality of the issue and decide that the White House counsel and justice will be coming involved in making decisions on whether a particular organization and a particular hiring practice, I would assume, would be constitutional or not.
This all seems to me like a litigator's fantasy. All right? It seems that lawsuits are going to come racing out of every imaginable quadrant and precinct of the United States. Like you said, we have tens of thousands of these faith-based groups. There's a limited pot, and they're all going to be competing for grants, and the government is going to decide who gets the grants. Right? What might happen to some of those groups that don't get their share of the pie? What might one of their impulses be if they're not granted any monies by the government?
You would assume, since this is America, they would end up in court.
Why would the Obama administration want to bring this upon itself at this very difficult moment in American history?
Well, Obama promised during his campaign that he would create this office. He has made a commitment to carrying out his campaign promises. This was a major campaign promise. He's locked into it now, and he's got to deal with the complexities as they arise.
Now, isn't this the essence of entanglement? Thousands of groups applying to the government adjudicating on what basis God knows as to which of these grants is more viable, and the government making decisions about essentially the integrity and the efficacy of religious groups to provide services to the population writ large.
That's precisely the problem, and that's why previous administrations have tried to stay out of it. And the Obama administration is really taking up a very tangled mess.
Jackie Salmon of the Washington Post, thank you so much for coming to Faith Complex today.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
How long do we think we're going to? At least Josh will have a lot to work with, right, Josh?
Yay.